wanted to talk this one because some of you might have had a chance to check out the recent documentary that went up on Shudder and I guess Prime Video called Horror Noir as well too. And that documentary told a lot of tales about black horror just in cinema in general. They focused on a lot of the big important horror movies of the last, 60, 70 years or so that were predominantly black led or black featured or black directed, written, all those kind of things. And it's a great documentary because you can kind of see a lot of the big points about black people in the horror genre specifically. And they got a lot of great names, filmmakers, writers, directors, actors, producers, authors to take part in that documentary. Really, really empowering, really deep as well too. And from that sprang this project, movie basically called Horror Noir, that the whole idea was that we were going to collect a bunch of black filmmakers and basically present a collection of anthology tales to the audience. And this is what we got. Now, if you got a chance to check this out, because it is free to watch right now on a number of streaming services. For example, it's free to watch right now on Shudder and on Prime Video. If you have AMC, you can get it through that as well too. And then it's also available to rent on a lot of these platforms as well too. And if you've been looking for more anthology horror, which is just great, it's just great. That's one of my favorites, y'all. If slasher flicks are like my number one, anthology stories are number two when it comes to horror. Just because I love the idea of telling shorter base stories where you can have different casts, different filmmakers, different just feels to every story that you tell. And Horror Noir is perfect for that. We have 6 different tales in here, 6 completely different tales. And considering the fact that they actually have a decent runtime, it's a 2-hour runtime, so that equates to what? About between 20 and 30 minutes for per hour at that point there. Like, was it 25? Is that what it would be? 25 minutes, I think, is what it comes out to now. So we get decent run times. We have really good directors and writers behind this, and then we also have a really great cast as well too. If you've seen the trailers, if you've seen clips of some of the stories that are in there, we have Lesley-Ann Brandt, who you might remember from things like Spartacus, my absolute favorite TV show. So good. You have Malcolm Barrett in there as well too. Sean Patrick Thomas, Tony Todd, Rachel True, Brandon Michael Smith, Lavelle Crawford. There's actually a really good cast to this Horror Noir film. And it's interesting because each tale has seemingly looked different in terms of quality and in terms of style. It looks like each filmmaker really did come at this very separately. And I point that out because when we've seen other anthology stories to where sometimes those tales might be connecting to each other, then we don't really get a different feel for it. We don't get a different sense from all the other tales. There's not really a big way to differentiate them. Not in a negative way, but that's kind of the way Trick or Treat works. If you ever seen Trick or Treat, amazing anthology horror film. They have a bunch of different filmmakers doing different segments in there, but all the segments technically have to do with each other. But because of that, the look of all of them is the exact same. There's really not that much different between one tale to the next in terms of looks and feels from it. Horror Noir felt very different with all the tales that were in there. And I'm not going to cover each of them because I really want everybody to have a chance to check it out as well too. But our 6 tales were Daddy, about a couple trying to get pregnant and bring a baby into the world, but not necessarily the way that you might envision. We have The Bride Before You, Brand of Evil, The Lake, Sundown, and Fugue State. Now, out of all these tales, I'm going to focus my time on 3 of them. Brand of Evil, The Lake, and Sundown, because these were really, these ones stood out to me more than any of the other stories in this film, and I really did enjoy them. Brand of Evil tells about a young artist who suddenly begins to get these additional job opportunities by basically passing on a lot of responsibilities he has in his community right now. Brandon Michael Smith plays our lead in this particular tale as Nakani. And basically, Nakani's role in this is that He is an artist who's trying to make something of himself. He's very talented. He's very entrenched in his community. And right now he's actually working on a mural that's going to go up at a local Black Rand community center. But his work has started to be more requested by a mysterious client that's willing to pay him an excess amount of money, but it also requires him skipping out on his regular commitments that he has. Unfortunately, every time Nakani completes a project, somebody turns up dead in his community. Are the two things related? You'd have to watch to find out. This story probably hit me harder than any of the other ones in there, only because this story very much reminded me of Tales from the Hood for whatever reason. And I don't know specifically why. Tales from the Hood, I've talked about on the show before. It's a fantastic horror anthology tale from the early 90s that tells a lot of stories about things happening in the world at the time. You know, police brutality, racial injustice and intentions, political, racial issues, all these kinds of things. And this story here, featuring Brandon Michael Smith, it really did speak to me, because basically what we were seeing was this character, Nakani, basically put a dollar tag on his morals, on what was important to him. Like basically like saying, look, like you can have the chance to make your work and make this money, and it's all about the cash at that point. Or you could stay helping out your community like you intend to do, like you've been doing, and actually offer them something that they very much need. And as the stories keep going on and on and on, and we see more of the projects that he's taking, we see just how much he's giving up just to get that money. And that, I guess that spoke to me because, you know, I run my own business. I run a Black-owned business. And so the idea of compromising your morals just to get an extra dollar is something that, you know, I've dealt with numerous times before. And I don't think I could compromise it in the way that Nakani did. But of course, we all say that until that's brought to us, until we're in that moment and have to make that decision. And again, I really don't want to spoil what the twist of that particular tale was, because you're pretty much can pick it up about halfway through it. It's interesting. Again, with the short times of these tales, we actually, like, I felt like each of them got really, really good runtime for them. So we weren't really missing much in the way of fluff. Like, it felt like watching a Tales from the Crypt episode in terms of length for each of these stories. And this happened to be my favorite story of the 6 that were on this. It's a very, like, the twist itself, like, it's not that it falls on its head. It's really, really good, but it's not as scary as I'm sure it probably could have ended up. But what's behind that twist, though, the evilness behind that, I really did enjoy, because you can definitely see it coming, and it tells a very poignant tale about people need to be careful these days about what do your creative endeavors really go out to support, because these days everything needs to wash both hands to make sure one's not doing the wrong thing there. So, really did enjoy that story. The one, though, that I think most of you are really going to like is The Lake. Now, The Lake starred Lesley-Ann Brandt from Spartacus, about this teacher who moves to a new town, buys a new house that's on the edge of a lake. And she's warned immediately that, you know, there's been some disturbances and there's been some issues around this lake, and that she should never go swimming in it, that some kind of monster has killed multiple people surrounding this lake in years past. So, as Abby's her name, I'm sorry. As Abby continues to make her living around town, she's a high school teacher. She ends up needing a landscaper and decides to employ one of her young, impressionable students in her class. Now, what I really, really enjoyed about this tale were all the pepperings that they did earlier on, because as Abby goes to the school for the first time to get, you know, set up and integrated and everything, the first person that catches eyes with her is this young kid who's going to start landscaping for her. And honestly, that just, ooh, like that caught me really, really off guard, because I saw it as Abby's walking into the school. This kid kind of gives her the side eye and stares at her for a moment, but I don't know how many people really noticed that until, you know, a few minutes later, when this kid starts chiming up in Abby's class, and then she hires him. And you can definitely feel, obviously, there's some tension between Abby, our teacher, and this kid, who there seems to be some kind of infatuation, and her hiring him as a landscaper obviously can't lead to anything good. Now, Abby was warned numerous times to stay out of that lake, and that the lake calls to you, and that it does evil things. But unfortunately, she's unable to resist and takes a swim. and Abby herself begins to put others in dangers as we begin to find out the mysteries of this lake. Now, just like the previous story that I was mentioning here, the brand of evil, the thing is that about halfway through the lake, you can get an idea, if you're familiar with a number of mythical monsters, you can get an idea of what the reveal is going to end up being. And honestly, I think it's a very, very strong tale because it talks a lot about temptation, and if we're faced with it, what would we do? It's kind of carrying the tale from Brand of Evil over, saying like, what are you willing to sacrifice for this temptation that's right in front of you? And Lesley-Ann Brandt, who is a tremendous, tremendous actress, does such a good job writing the line of going for these new cravings and desires that her character wants, versus also trying to not hurt anybody or not, cause any issues for anybody or anything that's in this her new home. And the ending is fantastic. It teaches another very, very important tale that, again, I can't spoil just because it is so good and it's such an engrossing story that everybody, I feel, should be watching as well too. What I will say though is, between both Brand of Evil and the lake, we do start to see a little bit of the limitations of maybe the budget, because the monster in Brand of Evil is a very very traditional, very just run-of-the-mill design for the monster we end up seeing. And the one that we see in the lake, it is a little bit more terrifying, but we don't really see that much of it. So this both tends to point out the advantages and disadvantages to having a budget, And the last one as a part of this story that I want to talk about is Sundown, about a group of activists who end up in a town that still practices sundown laws. Now, if you've never heard of a sundown town before, this is a town to where black people and other people of color usually are not welcomed in. And basically the idea is, before the sun goes down, you need to get the hell out of Dodge, because your safety is not insured if you're there after the sun goes down. Now, already, for anybody of color who's watching this tale, you can already feel a lot of tension from that, because this is something that still exists in the United States at today's age as well too. I've been lucky enough to not have to come across one of these towns myself, but the fact that it's still a real thing that's out there, that's scary enough as it is. And were it just a story like that, to where they're talking about this group of activists where a couple of them are black and they're the ones getting hunted, and it's like they're being targeted because of the fact that they're black, that alone would have been a very, very scary tale. But it's actually brought up a notch as well, because it turns out that these activists, sure, it's a sundown town, but it's not a sundown town for the reasons that you may think. And the twist, again, is something that you could pick up right away, literally right away. When they decide to start bringing it over, you can pick up where that twist is going, but it doesn't stop it from being any less enjoyable, as some of the residents of this town, played by Peter Stormare of all people, and Lavelle Crawford, as I said as well, add so much flavor and just different personalities for us to experience in this crazy, crazy town. Now, this tale will be a more traditional one that I think people will latch onto a little bit more, just because you don't really need to know about like all these other monsters that are in some of the other tales. It's not too complicated of a story, and it's a very straightforward one that, yes, there's a twist, but the twist is revealed fairly early on. It's not the crux of the story itself. And I think that makes this tale of Sundown more accessible to casual viewers who don't really want to get into the mythology of other things or need to have previous knowledge of some of these monsters that might show up in these tales. But what Horror Noir really does a good job of is, sometimes it's easy to get an anthology tale that's not a big mainstream theatrical or at least streaming release that has all this money behind it, and not have the talent behind to back up this project. And Horror Noir really, really does. The writing can get a little bit wonky in some places. Out of the 6 tales there, I will say that I really, really didn't find myself latching on that well. to Daddy, honestly. And Bride Before You was decent enough. It wasn't as great as I wanted it to be, but it was good though. And that can be the problem sometimes with anthology tales, is that if you have multiple stories, some might not be as strong as the other. But the good thing is that even with the writing in some of these tales not being up to par to the rest, the cast definitely helps to elevate this material. They got a good cast of well-known actors as well as relative newcomers in this, to where everybody's kind of mixed and matched together. So one cast can bring out the best out of another cast, and the tales just really just blend well together and come, like, they're very comforting, honestly, which is weird for a bunch of tales about sensitive natures to Black people. It's interesting how comforting a lot of this is. Like, it feels like something that has been around for a while, if that makes any kind of sense. This seems like a movie that a lot of us would have been growing up on, similar to a Tales from the Hood as well too. So it's definitely one that I want y'all to go and check out. Again, it's available on Shudder, on AMC, on Prime Video right now. You absolutely need to catch it. It's called Horror Noir. Make sure you're looking for the movie though, not the documentary. Hell, watch them both, honestly. Watch documentary, then watch the actual movie. And let me know what you think about this one in the comments. Again, folks, that's Horror Noir. This video, whether it was a review, whether it was a new episode, whether it was an unboxing, an interview, or whatever else, I want to remind you, you can check out my separate reviews also on my YouTube page, and new full episodes go up every Wednesday night on YouTube at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and on your favorite podcasting platforms at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like and share. My name is T. We've been talking scary movies. Stay scared.